For some reason today, Joel Klatt tried to minimize TCU's playoff win against Michigan by saying they potentially cheated. I'll tell you what's going on and why it's really weird how the national media wants to erase history here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Going to start in a weird place today. Usually we're talking about the game itself, the team itself. We're going to get to that. Big game against SMU this week in segment 2. I'll do keys to the game, predictions, all that jazz. But something happened today. I'm recording this on Thursday evening. It went down Thursday, I guess, morning on the Colin Cowherd show. That was very odd. Joel Klatt was on with Colin, and I like Joel Klatt. I think he does a fine job as an analyst on the main Fox broadcast. And they're doing their weekly hit where they talk about college football. And they were discussing Michigan and the sign stealing scandal. I'm not really sure what got them on this tangent, but Colin was mentioning the Netflix documentary about Connor Stallions and that whole fiasco. And to be fair, I haven't watched that documentary. No real reason why, other than I just haven't gotten around to it. Also, I mean, it looked like kind of a puff piece, to be honest. But I don't really hold much vitriol towards Michigan for the whole sign stealing thing. I'm not naive. I feel like there's probably a lot of teams around the country that are trying to find an advantage in that way. And they got punished for it. Jim Harbaugh had to sit out some games. He was suspended. They won the national title last year. It appears they did that fair and square. So, hey, whatever, right? Jim Harbaugh moved on, and the wheels keep turning. But they were basically, both of them were excusing the fact that Michigan cheated, was trying to find an advantage, was stealing people's signs, going to great lengths to do that. And essentially saying, like, it didn't matter. They're still national champs. They're still a great football team, all that. And then in the middle of it, Joel Klatt, just unprompted, is kind of making the connection or beating around the bush and saying, well, you know, everybody is sort of doing this to some extent or trying to find a way to decode signs and those types of things. And he says there are rumblings that TCU had help in the playoff game where they beat Michigan. And so James T. Yoder, who works for Chat Sports and is a Michigan man, he took that quote. And I don't take this tweet very seriously. This seems like someone who has a fetish for being yelled at. And so I don't want to really participate in this. What I mean by that is, you know, people get online and they just say things that are kind of incendiary because they want attention or they want folks to respond to it. And so James says this: Joel Klatt confirms what I've thought for almost 2 years. TCU stole Michigan signs and play calls in the 2022 semifinal. You expect me to believe that the only loss in 2 years was to TCU and they were legit? It cost Michigan back-to-back national titles. Now, Joel Klatt didn't say that TCU stole Michigan signs. I guess he sort of alluded to it. There was no follow-up, by the way. Colin Cowherd was just like, oh, yeah, that could have happened. And then they just moved on to the next thing. But it pointed out something to me that is unfortunate. It's just how it is as a TCU fan. You know, for a long time, I sort of rejected the notion that the national media cared about or pushed the agenda of big brands, blue bloods, whatever you want to call them in college football. I thought that was nonsense. Not total nonsense, but I thought it was overblown. I'm a fan just like you. I've said this before. I'm not an insider. I'm emotional about these things like you guys are. And I think as fans, we can be biased and emotional and we can have opinions that aren't necessarily true. We kind of build the narrative in our head. But I guess you could say I was radicalized by 2014 and by TCU and Baylor being left out of the playoff picture when they were both great teams and TCU only had one loss. And it wasn't so much the resume as it was that TCU was consistently ranked third until the last week of the season. That was very weird, right? And the Frogs deserve all the criticism and ridicule that they have gotten and will continue to get for what happened in the national championship game. I made a joke on Twitter when I saw this. I was like, I wish we would have cheated in the national championship game. Like, if we were cheating, I wish we would have continued it against Georgia. But they deserve all the heat for that. It was a disaster. I think that TCU team was better than they showed in that ball game, but bottom line was the score was the score. The game was the game. They lost 65-7. It sucked. But let's not pretend. Because of that debacle, there has been revisionist history over the last couple of years of, TCU didn't deserve to be there. No, they won that game on a neutral field fair and square. Now, we can go through all the reasons why. I don't think Michigan took them particularly seriously. I don't. I feel like if you got Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff in a quiet moment, that they would admit that they didn't think TCU had much of a chance in that ball game, and it showed up on the field. That's not TCU's fault. All the things that Michigan fans said for months, and I was here, I was doing shows during that time, and a lot of them hopped in the YouTube comments. There's still some that occasionally do and gloat about the fact that TCU fell on their face last year. But all those Michigan fans that got on here when I was doing shows previewing this and said, oh my goodness, Michigan's just going to run them over. They're just physically going to beat them down. They're going to run the ball at will. They're going to destroy the TCU offense. That did not happen. TCU ran the ball down their throat. Amari DiMercado had 150 yards rushing. The TCU team themselves had 263 yards on the ground. Michigan had 186 on the ground. TCU turned it into a track meet. Max Duggan was great. The defense had 2 pick sixes. Make all the excuses you want. TCU won that game. If they played 10 times, I don't know what the results would be, but I know on that day, TCU was a better football team. And they won that game fair and square. And the idea that they somehow got help by decoding signals is just so dumb. And again, it was like such a throwaway line that he backed up with no factual evidence. He's just like, oh yeah, I heard TCU had help. If the help he's referring to is what Sonny Dykes has admitted in public since that ball game, which was, coaches talk. And we had some people giving us phone calls when we got that Michigan matchup and saying, you better change your signs because this is what they're doing. Didn't exactly know how, but they've got some sort of advantage. And so TCU changed their signs. If you want to consider that help, go ahead. But that is very different than what Michigan did. And I have no animosity towards Michigan for what happened. Whatever. Okay, you pushed the envelope too far. To me, it's very similar to the Astros scandal, right? In baseball for 200 years, have people been trying to steal signs? Sure. Were there other teams that year in 2017 that were probably pushing the envelope and trying to find new ways to decode signs? Yeah. But Houston went about a system that was shady and was under the table, and they got caught. And because of that, there's a shadow over that championship. Now, the Astros have gone on to be very successful since. They won another title. They've been to a couple World Series. They've been to like every ALCS in the last 7 years. I get all that. But they made some mistakes that season. Michigan made some mistakes in that year. They ended up winning the national championship fair and square last year. So I'm not going to diminish their accomplishments, but don't diminish TCU's accomplishment. Because that team won that ball game. Now, the next week, things fell apart. But they beat Michigan. Steve Avila and that offensive line, they got it done. The defense did enough to get it done. Every time it looked like, okay, here comes the Wolverines. They're just going to, take over this ball game and win going away like we thought they would from the jump. That's not what happened. TCU had an answer. They found a way to score. They found a way to, keep Michigan at arm's distance. And at the end of the day, they won that ball game. And I just it's such a silly thing to try to make excuses for a team that lost one game in 2 years. But they lost that day. And hey, again, national championship, bad deal. Last season, big letdown. Game against UCF last week, that was rough. But we're not taking away that semifinal win. Nick Saban's on TV now. Nick Saban, best college football coach of all time. But he's been on TV saying, well, Alabama, we got shafted that year. We should have been in the college football playoff. No, we shouldn't have. Oh, we beat Kansas State. TCU lost to Kansas State. Who cares? You lost 2 games. Get over it. TCU won that game on neutral field against a really good Michigan team. And nobody can take that one away, no matter how hard they try. We're going to talk about Josh Hoover and his leadership next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. eBay Motors. If you need a part for your car, listen, I've said this before. I'm not afraid to admit it. I am not super well-versed in vehicle maintenance. It's a place where I struggle. But the good news is eBay Motors can help me. They have the Guaranteed Fit program. What is that? Well, you put in the make and model of your vehicle. You pick the parts you need. There's millions of parts available at ebaymotors.com. You put it in your shopping cart, and it will let you know immediately. Yes, this is the right part for your car, or no, you need to keep looking. eBay Motors, millions of parts for your MVP. You cannot mess around with your ride. It gets you everywhere you go. eBay Motors, win every time with a part that fits your ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit program, not available to U.S. customers. eBay Motors, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So TCU has this series. It's on YouTube now. It's called Carter Boys. And it's well done. It's a look back at the week before, the game itself. They do some cool stories about guys on the team. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes footage. To be honest, I haven't watched it in a while because last season the team struggled, and they don't really show you a lot of the struggle. I mean, it's pretty light and positive, which is fine. I think they do a good job with it. But I kind of got away from watching it because I was just like, this isn't giving me exactly what I thought it was going to be. I realize there's a lot of logistics behind that too. But I saw Barstool TCU share this 30-second clip on Twitter today, and I retweeted it if you want to check it out, at SimcockSteven on Twitter. And Sonny Dykes had just gotten done addressing the team after the loss to UCF. And he says, all right, let's break it down. And before he does, Josh Hoover steps up. And it's obvious he wants to say something. And I'm not going to get it word for word because it was a long quote. But basically, he just looks the team in the eyes and he's like, listen, nothing that happened tonight shakes my confidence about this group and who we are and what we can be. We got to look in the mirror and figure out what we did wrong and watch the film and improve. And then we got to move on to the next thing. And it was awesome. It was cool to see it. And one thing that Josh has done consistently since he took over last year, and we talked about this before, all the intangible stuff, it just feels like he hits it out of the park. He's a great leader. The team seems to rally around him. I think he's super positive. He encourages others. And so all that's great. Now, hey, you got to go win the games. If they're going to turn this around, they have to go execute on the field against SMU starting tomorrow. And if you don't do that, then that's the bottom line, right? Like, that's the priority. But it appears that this team has player leadership, which is a positive because last year, at least according to their head coach, they were lacking in that department. And I think Josh does a good job of rallying that team, just helping them kind of understand, like, hey, here's where we need to be. And he just appears to be a good leader, which is great to see. Now, the other part of that is you can be intangible guy, but you also have to be good. And so far, Josh has been really good. I mean, he's just been a great quarterback through the first 3 weeks of the season. And it feels like, I mean, it's early in the year, and we'll have to see what happens over the next 9 weeks. But I said before the season, I was like, we're going to find out what we have here. It's going to be good either way, because either we're going to find out that this is the dude for the foreseeable future, or you got some questions at QB. Right now, I don't have any questions at QB. I think this guy is the dude moving forward. And he looks the part. He's playing at a high level. And so that's really encouraging because, I mean, it's somewhat unexpected what he's been able to do since taking over for Chandler Morris midway through last season. But it's Iron Skillet week. TCU gets SMU, 4 o'clock on the CW, because that's where C football lives. It lives on the CW. And this is a big game. Like, win-loss record, it's big. I mean, it's the difference between 3-1 and 2-2. If you end up 2-2, then I think you're starting to say to yourself, all right, are we fighting for bowl eligibility again? If you can keep pace and get to 3-1 and hit the stretcher on the conference schedule, then everything is kind of still in front of you. But I also just think it's a big game psychologically. SMU, it was really interesting to hear Billy and Body talk about this matchup yesterday, because the last 2 years, Billy's been really confident. And that's not me criticizing him. It's just an observation. Like the last 2 seasons, I've come away from our conversations saying, okay, he thinks SMU is going to win this game. And they didn't. And he leveled with me on that. He's like, listen, last couple seasons, they've made a big deal about this game. Obviously, the Sonny Dykes connection is a huge part of it. But they've really put a lot of pressure on themselves to win it. And he said they've come out overhyped, or whatever the case is, they just haven't played at a high level. And TCU dominated them last year, and that was not a great TCU team, as we know. But I think SMU's talented. I feel like it's going to be a competitive ball game on Saturday. My keys, offensively, you either need to run the ball, or, because I know many of you have said, well, they just can't run the ball. You either got to run the ball, or you have to find a way to sustain drives to the passing game. And I think that comes down to getting in more second and third and manageable. Because even when they were humming last week, it was converting a lot of third and longs. And that's just not a recipe for success. So the offense has to continue to get more consistent. And I don't know what the split's going to be as far as, run attempts versus pass attempts. But if you're not going to run the ball consistently, then you have to find something to supplement it to get positive yardage on first and second down so you can keep those chains moving and keep SMU off the field. Secondly, Kevin Jennings, new quarterback for SMU, kind of new. I mean, he's been playing a lot this year, but he's been named the guy now. Put as much pressure on him as possible. I think this is a big week for Andy Avalos. Got hit in the mouth in the second half against UCF. How do you respond? A quarterback that can run the ball. Rhett Lashley, a Gus Malzahn disciple. I'm sure he's watched that film closely. I would imagine he's talked to Gus a little bit. He's going to try to implement some of those principles. Now, I don't think SMU can execute in the run game like UCF did, but they've got a guy that can move around the pocket, make plays, and can also just get downhill and run the ball himself. So you have to find a way to limit that. And when they do drop back to pass, put pressure on him. This is an SMU offense that struggled so far this year, aside from a huge performance against Houston Christian, which you would expect. Nevada, the first half was rough. BYU, they never found the end zone. So I think there's a chance for TCU to really bounce back on that side of the ball, especially with a young quarterback getting the start. But you have to put pressure on him. And then finally, just don't lose your killer instinct. If you get a big lead this week, keep your foot on the gas and go win this ball game and make sure that you don't give SMU a lot of hope, because you're running out of mulligans here, right? Like you took an L against UCF. You want to finish non-conference play 3-0 and then get ready for that Kansas game next week. Should be fun. My prediction, I think TCU wins. I got them winning by 7 points. I hope it's more comfortable than that, but I think SMU has talent. I feel like the bye week is going to help them. And I also think just having a clear direction at quarterback will be helpful. But I'll take TCU 34-27. And I guess we'll see how we feel afterwards. But I think that would be a good step in the right direction moving forward for this team. When we come back, we'll get some of your reaction. We will wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. This is just about your last chance to take advantage of this great deal from FanDuel. Excuse me. If you have YouTube TV, download the FanDuel app. One $5 bet, just one $5 bet, and you will get 3 months of NFL Sunday Ticket for free. That means any out-of-market game, any out-of-market NFL game, you can watch with YouTube TV and one $5 FanDuel bet for free for 3 months. NFL Sunday Ticket, I've heard it's amazing. Wish I could try it myself. FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel app. College football, NFL, Major League Baseball, all kinds of things to bet on right now. FanDuel, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network and official betting partner of the NFL. All right, let me know what your predictions are for TCU SMU in the comments. There will be a post-game show. I'll keep you updated on social media. I'm not sure if it's going to be exactly after the game because of some logistics I have going on with family, but we'll have a post-game show up on Saturday night, and it'll be live, and we can react together to whatever's going on. All right, Tommy Fisher says this game's going to tell us a lot about our culture and if this team is a real team or a bunch of talented individuals like we were last year. If we struggle and take an L at SMU, I think we end up with another 5-7 year, and that puts Sonny on the hot seat. Yeah, I mean, it's a big game. I agree with you for the most part. I think if you lose this ball game, then things get pretty dicey moving forward. And this will tell us about, okay, is this a group that can bounce back and find a way to right the ship, or is this a team that takes a early loss like that and lets it become a snowball effect? They played well for a half plus. Like it was really just a meltdown in the second half. And I wonder how we would feel if that UCF game was more like back and forth and they just lost by a point, on a tough last second drive. I don't know. But I think the way it went down is really what has people reeling and has people thinking, man, what are they going to do to get off the mat? Well, we'll see. But beating SMU would be a really good step in the right direction in a way to kind of course correct and get back where you want to be. Tanner McKinney says, I use the Gametime app, so thank you for telling me about it. He thinks TCU will shock SMU with a run game, and he bets they will run a lot more. I hope so, man. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see more balance in the offense. Thank you, Tanner, for using the Gametime app. Don't forget Gametime. Best place to buy tickets on the secondary market. So if you need tickets to this game, to the Houston game on October 4th, whatever it is that you're interested in, sporting event, theater show, whatever you need, Gametime is available for you. Iron Skillet, man, only 2 more of these left in this kind of format, and then we'll move on to whatever it looks like moving forward. But TCU SMU, 4 o'clock, again, that ball game on the CW. We'll have live post-game reaction Saturday night, and hopefully we're talking about a 3-1 football team that is headed the right direction and bounced back after a tough loss. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Don't forget we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the YouTube channel.